Hey guys, Kelade here. Welcome to my Mythic, the Queen's Court kill/commentary video. For this fight, we are going to be starting with all of our cooldowns on Patchmar. So that's Condensed Life Force, Pre-Pot, Recklessness, Siegebreaker. Unfortunately, we couldn't get a Recklessness charge because the boss was a little bit too close, but no big deal. Just make sure you're far enough away to where you can charge and get that free rage. The reason we're starting with Patchmar is because we want to push one boss down to 35% HP. That way our Shadow Priests can all proc their Twist of Fate and get that 10% additional, damage and healing for the rest of the fight, once we get there. The instant this Potent Spark comes out, switch to it, AoE it down, cleave it down as fast as you can, because the faster you can kill the first Potent Spark, the easier it makes your second and third one. Because you don't want to kill them too close in proximity, right? Because that debuff you see disappearing right now, if you have that debuff while another one goes off, that's basically going to be a wipe on the difficulty. All right, so right here, we're just keep DPSing Patchmar. The only time we're going to get off right here is the Zealous Eruption that's going to occur in a couple of seconds. Once that happens, right, just make sure that you get back onto the melee boss, Sylvanas, is before that cast is over, because you want to make sure that you stand in this bubble. If not, you'll probably be dead. Right here, I'm not going to use any cooldowns on him, right? Just make sure to try to get a last, Bloodthirst off on him. Maybe proc Coastal Hot Blood, and I think we did actually. And then get back to Patchmar. Right here, unfortunately, I wasn't paying attention and I get silenced. No big deal. As far as for not getting silenced here, one thing you can do is off global cooldown abilities does count as one of the spells, so you don't cast two spells at the same time. So let's say you don't have your Bloodthirst and Raging Blow ready and you have to cast two Whirlwinds. You can cast a Whirlwind while that one, while your global cooldown is still happening, you can cast a Berserker Rage or Kick, and then you can cast a Whirlwind again and it won't silence you. So off global cooldown stuff does count. I think Hero Game might count too, but you kind of want to save it right here. Right, so right here for Violent Outburst, DPS it a little bit and then kind of leap out the last second and then you go back in. So right there, before I leaped out, actually, I did use my second Recklessness and Siegebreaker before I leaped out. I do think that's very important on this fight. If you want to get the maximum DPS out, you do want to use all of your cooldowns as soon as possible. Now, you might lose 1 or 2 seconds of your Recklessness and then maybe 3 or 4 seconds of your Siegebreaker on there, but I do think for this fight it's worth it, especially if you're running Condensed Life Force, because for Condensed Life Force, right, the cooldown on that is 3 minutes. Cooldown of Recklessness is 1.5, right? So you really want to just be using everything on cooldown all the time. That way you can just use as many basic abilities as you can. As far as for talents on this fight, I am using Endless Rage, Double Time, Sudden Death, Warpaint, Carnage, Dragon Roar, and Siegebreaker. Basically the same talents as every other fight. And then for our essences, I am using Condensed Life Force rank 3 and Crucible of Flame rank 3. So right there, once again, we called for everybody to soak the charge, so we all got in there, and we're all stacking in here for the Zealous Eruption. Just make sure you're in the bubble. And then once this is over, I am going back to Patchmar. Now, they did call for melee get out the boss right now because we pushed to 35% right here. But generally, if you're wearing Ink Pot and the Coral Trinket, if you haven't been hitting that target that you've been stacking up for a while, generally when you go back onto it, you'll stack up a few more stacks really, really quickly. So that's what I did. Go back on Patchmar, right? Make sure I refresh my Ink Pot stacks just in case she gets pushed to 30% too slow. It shouldn't be a problem because, that lasts 2 minutes now. So it should last on her long enough for her to slowly get pushed down to 30% and proc. And, just in case, also just to add a couple more stacks, right? Just hit her for a few seconds and then you can get back on Sylvanas, the melee guy. So the reason why we do actually Patchmar first and Sylvanas second is generally for your melee group, fighting Sylvanas is super easy, right? Because he doesn't do any mechanics where your melee has to run out. And actually, he does a mechanic where you have to get into melee. So it makes it super easy for melee to do it. So it's generally, do you want the easier phase in the beginning of the fight, or do you want the easier phase for melee at the end of the fight? So we kind of just opted to make it a little bit easier at the end of the fight, because right here, right, with the standalone, with the limited space, it can get a little bit crowded. So, we're opting to make the end a little bit easier, because there's so much more things going on at that point. So right here, just keep DPSing him down. Like I said, your cooldowns, you basically want to use them as much as possible. You want to keep your uptime on this boss as much as you can. Right now in this fight, we are running 4 melee, so that's why you're seeing me on the side instead of always behind the boss. When we were doing progression earlier, we were actually running 3 melee. That does obviously make it much, much easier, but you can definitely handle 4. If you really wanted to, you can probably stick a 5th melee in there, but I think that's pushing it. I don't really think you want more than that. If you do have more than that, then you're probably going to have melee on different bosses at different times. But generally, as long as you have Shadow Priest in the raid, Going with the strategy of bursting one boss down to 35% so they can get their Twist of Fate stacks is probably going to be the prevailing strategy, and it's probably going to be the best strategy that is there. Now, when Pashmar hit 30% HP, I wasn't really watching HP and, trying to line up my Coral Trinket activation with it. I actually couldn't. I think it was on cooldown at that point. But for Sylvaas, I am very, very, very much paying attention to his HP, right? He's at 41% right now, right? I'm thinking about it. So right here, this Violent Outburst, just make sure you don't, stand in the group with it. I don't know why there were so many people in melee. Generally, for the Violent Outburst, you can actually stay in melee and keep DPSing the boss. But for some reason, there were like 10 people in melee right there. But yeah, as far as for the core is concerned, right? So right here, I see the boss at 37% HP. Okay, so I'm making a mental note to myself to keep watching it, and I'm not going to use my Razor Coral until he's basically at 31% HP, right? That way I can kind of almost guarantee that crit. It's not completely guaranteed, but really increase the chances, right? Because if you can get your Ink Pot to crit, it's a huge damage boost. It's probably why my damage overall is so high in this fight, because my Ink Pot crit on both the Pashmar, range boss, and it's also going to crit on this guy too. So, getting double crit on the Ink Pot on this fight is actually huge, right? So right here, we call another thing to just help soak. So just soak it. You kind of get aimed in the direction of, so like for the charge, you kind of get aimed in the direction like away from the middle of the charge. So like you can kind of position yourself in a way to where you want to get bounced in a favorable location. One thing that can happen is if you can get bounced into somebody else that has a fanatical verdict. So just kind of watch out, pay attention to other people, make sure that you're not going to get bounced into them. Also, if you have the fanatical verdict, don't be standing in a place where people can get bounced right into you, right? You don't want that. So right here, standalone happens again. Just be careful. Generally, I think this is one of those fights, especially this mechanic right here, like as your tank is moving him from standalone, it's one of those things where like as you just pull the boss more and more, everybody kind of knows like how your tank is going to move the boss, where he's going to move the boss, how fast he's going to move the boss. Once everybody gets that down and like range gets out of his way, melee knows when to keep up, it does make this fight much, much easier. Right here, we're just, focusing the boss down. We do have a call, I think at one point very, very soon to start switching to the range boss because we actually pushed the melee boss a little bit too fast now, right? Melee boss 2%, range boss is at like 6%. So we come here, switch it over a little bit. And then we also realize that we're getting close. So 7:30 into the fight is when the boss is in rage. When that happens, your tanks are probably going to get one shot really, really quickly. And then the bosses are going to go around and one-shotting everybody else. Now, the other thing is if these bosses are too close together, they'll become basically immune to damage, right? So what happens is as they battle in rage, you definitely want to burst one as fast as you can. So that way the other boss isn't too close and then they both become immune. And then that's really a wipe, right? But yeah, that's it for the Queen's Court. As always, thanks for checking out the video, guys. Feel free to subscribe to see more. See ya.